I used to think fear was simple. Heights, darkness, spiders, the usual glitches wired into our DNA. But the night my phone showed me something I never searched for, I realized fear could be engineered. The image wasn't shocking. Not at first glance anyway. It was just my apartment, my own living room, perfectly accurate. Right down to the tiny crack in the wall and that hallway light that always flickers. What made my chest tighten, what made the air leave my lungs, was what I knew waited just outside the frame. The AI didn't just guess what scared me. It knew how long I'd paused on certain videos, how my heart rate probably spiked during specific scenes in horror movies. It knew how fast I scrolled when something made me uncomfortable. We tell ourselves that algorithms don't understand emotion, that they just process numbers and patterns. But fear is a pattern, and for years, I had been feeding it mine. Every social media reaction, every late-night search down a weird rabbit hole, every video I abandoned halfway through, every article I only half-read before clicking away. Every single hesitation became a data point. Every avoidance, a signal, quietly, patiently. The machine stitched them all together, and what it generated wasn't a random horror. It was precise. It used claustrophobic camera angles, suffocating lighting, spaces that felt smaller and smaller the longer I stared. My brain reacted before any logic could intervene. This wasn't the uncanny valley, where things look almost human but not quite. This was familiar territory turned hostile. It was the kind of nightmare where you recognize the room you're in, and you realize escape was never part of the design. We used to worry about deepfakes, about fake faces and fake voices. But this is the next level. This is about deep responses, about triggering the exact neurological sequence that tells your body you are in danger. Imagine an arachnophobe opening a video that perfectly mirrors their own bedroom. Same bed, same shadows on the wall, same clock ticking on the nightstand. Then, a movement begins, subtle at first, but undeniable just a few seconds later. Or imagine a claustrophobe watching a video of endless, familiar corridors that begin to collapse inward. The walls breathing, the ceiling lowering. The real horror isn't just the image on the screen. It's how accurately it mirrors your own internal panic. Your brain doesn't stop to ask if the threat is real. If the stimulus matches the fear pattern it knows, the response fires. Adrenaline floods your system, your logic shuts down, and your memory brands the moment as a real trauma. Now, imagine this technology scaled, used not for a cheap scare, but as a weapon. Imagine it aimed at political dissidents, at journalists, at ordinary people who have been flagged by some system as high risk. They aren't silenced or arrested. They're just psychologically eroded, one personalized nightmare at a time. Fear is so much more effective when it's private. When no one else sees what you saw, no one else can believe how real it felt. That isolation becomes part of the weapon. The long-term damage isn't just panic attacks or sleepless nights. It's a fundamental distrust. A distrust of images, a distrust of screens, and eventually, a distrust of your own perception of reality. When reality itself becomes negotiable, control doesn't need force. It just needs confusion, and confusion is cheap to produce when machines know you better than you know yourself. We are already training these systems to read our faces, our voices, our micro-expressions. The leap from detecting an emotion to generating a stimulus that creates that emotion is smaller than we want to admit. The real danger isn't just that an AI can scare us. It's that it can scare only us, in a way that no one else can see or prove. So how do you defend yourself from something that lives inside your own data trail? You have to minimize what you feed it. You have to start treating your attention like a currency, not just a reflex. The idea of privacy stops being some abstract concept when fear becomes personalized. When your worst nightmare isn't supernatural, but synthetic hand floating in a legally ambiguous gray area, developers talk about ethics. But ethics always moves slower than code. Regulation lags far behind capability, and capability never, ever waits for permission. The future of this won't announce itself with monsters and sirens. It will arrive quietly, wrapped in familiar images, tailored perfectly to the unique architecture of your mind. If all of this sounds paranoid, remember these. Every nightmare begins as a thought that someone learned how to reproduce, and once fear becomes reproducible, it becomes scalable. The most disturbing part of my experience wasn't the image itself. It was how quickly my own mind accepted it as real. It was how instinct overruled reason before I could even remind myself that this was just generated code on a screen. Fear doesn't ask for verification. It doesn't wait for evidence. When the brain recognizes a threat pattern, it reacts first and explains later if it ever gets around to explaining it all. That's where the real power of this technology lies. Not in perfect realism, but in perfect timing. In hitting the nervous system just milliseconds before doubt can even form. Once that threshold is crossed, the damage is already done. The memory settles into your brain as if it actually happened. It gets filed away right alongside your real experiences, indistinguishable in its emotional weight. And if a machine can place memories in your mind without any corresponding events, then reality itself becomes optional. The ground beneath our feet, the very idea of a shared truth, begins to dissolve. That's a thought more terrifying than any monster an AI could ever generate. Thanks for watching. Think about it, and maybe be a little more careful what you scroll past.